What-o chaps, recently I've been playing a bunch of racing or driving games on the side and wanted to talk about them. This time it's Grid, or Race Driver Grid. I don't really know the actual title of the game, because in Steam it's called Grid, and when I record it it's called Race Driver Grid, so anyway, pointless. This is based on Civ's recommendation in the comments of the Need for Speed Shift video, so thank you very much for that, man, because I enjoyed this game. The footage here is just going to be a quick variety pack of different tracks, disciplines and cars that I enjoyed playing with. I'm sure I'll include some Formula 3 stuff to talk about and probably some concept cars and prototypes as well. So when I said that Shift felt arcadey, I was not at all prepared for how Grid would feel. The first time you get into the career mode, they throw you in control of a Dodge Viper around a rough city track. I think it was Seattle with the uncontrollably bouncy hill section, and they basically say good luck. I wasn't a big fan of that idea, being that the controls are absolutely ridiculously oversensitive, but I pushed through. And then I thought I could turn off all the driving aids, traction control, ABS, stability control, but soon found out just how wrong I was. I was not prepared. Wheel spin is almost impossible to avoid without traction control. You have to have the most delicate touch on a controller to get a good start and clean exits on some of the corners. I've no idea how you would manage it on a keyboard, so let's not even go there. Without ABS, I would lock the brakes by just touching them, and go flying off the track and into a gravel trap or a grassy runoff, as if the brakes never even existed in the first place. This is when I found that those hazards make it literally impossible to go in a straight line, to rejoin the race, so if you want to do infinite donuts for some reason, then you don't even have to try. If you go off track, then you're never getting back on. You're literally done, just restart the race. All of that out of the way though, when I finally got to grips with how careful I needed to be on the controls, I actually did enjoy the game for what it was. The career mode was fun, though the inclusion of drifting was unnecessary as always, and I didn't really look forward to those events ever. I mean, I never do, I don't really click with drifting in these games, but they seem to keep putting them in, so I guess I'll just have to get good, I suppose. Grid gives you a teammate to manage as well as your sponsors, and a sort of custom livery system for your cars, which were all right, but lacking a lot of graphical fidelity. The teammate was an interesting inclusion, since they talk to you and they keep you informed during races about how they're doing and what to look out for, but out of the two guys that I had, they were both annoying in their own separate ways. Considering that they're supposed to be teammates and not rivals, the Irish guy that I hired was way too aggressive and would often fight me so hard for position that he would just ram me off the circuit, and then he would boast about being in first place. Yeah, cheers mate, yeah, you really earned that, thanks, I'll just restart and try again, shall I? To be fair though, the AI were all overly aggressive for the most part. Civ was right when he said that I'd encounter similar problems in Grid that I did in Need for Speed, about how first turn pile-ups were common. Yeah, they are. AI drivers had almost zero respect for leaving any room for a car that was attempting to pass cleanly, often cutting you off, and even though you're parallel to each other and you're mid-overtake, your nose is out in front, they just don't care. They just don't respect your presence at all, they just ram you off the circuit. It's really unfortunate. That kind of stuff is really frustrating to me in racing games, but to balance it out at least, they were quite prone to making their own mistakes as well, spinning out, locking the brakes and causing all sorts of problems for everyone else as well, so you're not the only person that's going to have problems with it. And I could sort of deal with that. With proper reactions and track awareness you can avoid most of those accidents as long as you're careful, but damage was always a big worry since you can't turn it off in this game, so when you do fail to avoid some of those cars bouncing off the sidewalls, you could easily end up caving in one of your wheel arches and ruining your steering. And I was alright with that too for the most part. Normally I like to turn damage off, but in this case it was quite fun to have that extra sense of danger in a race, and having to drive that extra bit more carefully. But you're definitely going to come across damage quite often, unless you're just much better than I am and I'm way worse than I realised. And in those cases the horrible noises your car makes when it is damaged were seriously grating to hear. The metal on metal grinding sound is just not good. I like hearing my engine. I don't like hearing just horrible noise in the background. So yeah, that's a fair bit of complaining, so it kinda sounds like I hated the game from what I've just said, doesn't it? But no, Grid was actually a lot of fun and it offered some interesting event types that I haven't played in another racing game yet. As I said at the start, the open wheel events let me experience some Formula 3 gameplay and some high downforce cars that were tons of fun around Spa in particular. It's like Eau Rouge was made for that sort of thing. I mean, it kind of was. Maybe not originally, but I mean, there's a whole flat-out Eau Rouge challenge stuff that people like to do, and, you know, anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
Way to slipstream!
It's also the only game I've played so far that has the Mazda 787B in it, which is a supercharged monster around the hard cornering Japanese tracks. It's really, really fun to drive. The prototypes were all distinct between the immense braking capabilities of LMP2 cars and the crazy power and acceleration of LMP1s. Driving the Le Mans events was a lot of fun, and I want more multi-class racing in more games because of how interesting it is to deal with overtaking traffic, and in the lower classes dealing with traffic overtaking you. I actually found that the AI are much better at dealing with traffic in different classes than they are with dealing with you trying to fight for position, which is maybe an interesting observation, maybe just not, I don't know. There was also no option for the racing line in Grid, which made me suddenly much more aware of where braking zones were, but luckily there's usually a lot of rubber left on the racing line, making it at least a little easier to spot those lines. And as long as you have ABS on, I think braking zones are really quite lenient. And with the controls being so responsive, it's quite easy to throw the car into those turns as well. Those assists did feel super limiting though sometimes, like the traction control would almost block me from using any throttle at all sometimes, which felt like the game was playing itself, until I did end up turning them off. There is so much more to talk about with Grid, but I risk rambling on way too much, meandering more than the turns of a 2-gate track do. So yeah, I would recommend Grid if you can pick it up cheap, but just know that it is an ultra arcadey game, and it does tend to show its age these days. Oh, and Kez, if you're listening in, if you thought the rearview mirror pop-out was bad in Need for Speed Shift, then, yeah, this is altogether something else. It's bad when you notice it. It's bad. Yeah, now I've ruined the game for you all. Don't look in your rearview mirror, just focus on driving forward. It's top bad advice for racing games from me, MagicalMike, and yeah. Let's stop here. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.